Good afternoon, we are Tim, Wisin and Yandel, and today we're going to discuss our findings regarding the Newton Automotive AG business case. So, let's dive into it. Why does Newton Automotive choose for Africa? This is related to three aspects. First, the production factors. Secondly, the sales related aspects. And lastly, becoming the technology and innovation leader. So, why are the production factors so favorable in Africa? Well, the first aspect is that there are low labor costs, which enables Newton Automotive to produce cars at a low cost price. Secondly, the domestic production. This means that producing in your own country makes people more motivated to produce cars that serve the needs and wants from the African population. Also, there's a lot of sales potential in the African market. This is due to the high GDP growth. Since a couple of years, the GDP is growing rapidly. Secondly, the margin versus volume model. For example, in China, there's a lot of volume, but there's also a lot of competition, which means that if we are selling in China, we cannot get good margins as well as not get a lot of volumes because there is a lot of competition already. But since we are one of the only players in the African market, we can go for high margins, and in the long-term growth perspective, high GDP means high volumes, so it means in the future we can go for a high margin but also a high volume, whereas in China we will never be able to accomplish this.
So why does Newton Automotive has the potential to become a technological leader in the African market? Well, first of all, since they're designing a product specifically for the African market and there's not a lot of competition doing the same thing, they will become a market innovator and also a technological leader. Furthermore, there is the OLI model, which is ownership, location and internalization. Ownership states that they've got a competitive advantage because they're producing their product specifically for the African market. When it comes to location, we're talking about the low labor costs. The countries mentioned in the case, which are Botswana, Kenya, Ghana and South Africa, are one of the more stable, or a few of the more stable countries in Africa, and that also helps them with the location aspect. Lastly, there's the internalization, which stands for that if you've got the knowledge yourself, then you should do in-house production instead of going to a supplier and other party in the supply chain. So, what are the main risks of Newton Automotive and how to mitigate these risks? Well, of course we know that the African market is not the same market size as Asia. The disposable income barrier is certainly there in Africa, which means that not everybody has the income level to start thinking about wanting to buy or being able to purchase a car. But due to the earlier mentioned high GDP growth, this disposable income barrier is slowly fading away, which will also solve the market size issue because the market size is going to increase very rapidly as soon as the GDP growth starts kicking off. Furthermore, there's the currency and exchange rate risk. However, this will be negated through the local production. If you're dealing in the same currency, then the currency and exchange rate risks is also highly mitigated. And lastly, there's the political instability. As earlier mentioned, the African countries mentioned in the case are among the more stable countries in Africa. And in addition to that, every single country in the world has a political instability risk. So it's almost impossible to mitigate these risks through selecting a specific country. So before Newton Automotive is ready to go abroad, further due diligence is needed on both the internal health check and the current establishment. When we're talking about the internal health check, it is Newton Automotive culturally ready to go abroad? And is Newton Automotive financially ready to go abroad? When we're talking about the current establishment, we're looking specifically at Africa. What are the production sites in Africa? What are the sales points in Africa? A lot more of local information is needed before we can go abroad with Yandel Automotive.